Hey guys, it's Adrian from the Pageant Project. My next guest is Shae Parsons, who is the newly crowned Miss Earth New Zealand 2025. She is a tech consultant, environmental advocate, and proud Māori and Pasifika wāhine. She holds a master's in computer information science and works closely with the AI Forum, focusing on Maori data sovereignty and sustainable tech. Her advocacy explores the environmental impact of AI and e-waste, blending her cultural roots with a future-forward lens. Shae uses her platform to make tech more accessible, especially for young women, and is passionate about showing that innovation and indigenous wisdom can work hand in hand for climate action. Well, Shae, that's a mouthful. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So how long have you had the crown and how does it feel so far?
Ooh, I want to say 6 days. So yeah, got that on Saturday, and it feels, apart from physically feeling quite heavy and me having to hold my head up completely straight, it feels like an immense privilege and an immense responsibility at the same time. And yeah, I just feel super. I don't know. Feel very excited, largely.
That's good to hear. I was speaking to the previous Miss Earth Wales just this week and I was talking about crowns and she said she's convinced that hers has left divots in her head. So just so you know, it is probably quite heavy. Sometimes it's not the most comfortable thing to wear, but I mean, you wear it well.
Yeah, I've got to prepare for that. Yeah, it's firmly bobby pinned in at the moment.
I can only imagine. Why don't we start? Because New Zealand is somewhat similar to Australia in that the pageantry scene isn't huge. It's not like somewhere like the US, for example. I just did an interview with someone in the US, and pageantry is an institution there, less so in Australia and New Zealand. How did you get involved in pageantry to begin with?
Yeah, my best friend, who's currently competing in Miss Universe New Zealand, was Miss Earth New Zealand 2017. And for me, I think because obviously I'm a slightly older contestant, so I built my career. I was very fortunate to enjoy quite a lot of success at quite a young age and thought, and yeah, pageantry isn't the biggest institution in
Yeah.
Australia and New Zealand. And I thought, I think there's a really good opportunity for me to bring people who wouldn't normally be interested in pageantry into pageantry because I feel like my positioning's quite unique and I'm very fortunate to have some of the skills that are so desperately needed in pageantry, being public speaking. And I just thought I have an opportunity to create a cool platform. And I went into it with a few, I guess, reservations, but definitely most, if not all, of those reservations have been proven to be completely wrong. And since being involved in pageantry, I'm super passionate about bringing more young women into it because I think it's such an incredible platform for people to develop themselves. So that's my slightly abridged yet not abridged answer to that.
Was this your first pageant ever?
No, I did Miss Universe New Zealand last year and I loved it. And I am so proud that my best friend's competing. And I think I was just like, I want a platform where I guess advocacy is probably the biggest aspect of it. And
Yeah.
it suited my strength, Earth suited my strengths a lot more as well. So second
Right.
pageant, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's still relatively new and you won it on your second turn, which is no small achievement. I mean, being new to the pageant world, what were some of the things that surprised you? Because I feel like going in, you never really know what to expect, especially in somewhere like Australia and New Zealand, where, we're not looking at pageants every single week. We don't have a pageant season, so to speak. So now having competed in two and two very big pageants, what were some of the things that surprised you or some of the misconceptions that got cleared up?
I think the first one is Passerella is I used to be a dancer a long time ago in high school, but Passerella is such an art form. It's a science. It's incredibly, there's a lot of technique to it. I genuinely thought I can kind of walk in heels, I can walk in a straight line, I'll be fine. obviously that's not the case. And I've really enjoyed kind of developing my pastorella, and I've really enjoyed learning more about the science behind it and, how your body needs to be positioned. So that's definitely the first one. I think the second misconception, and it's funny because I kind of wanted it to be the case, is I wanted to see really successful women, other successful women, and see them achieving things through pageantry and using it as a platform for what their, the rest of their life's journey may look like. And that definitely was, I was either like, oh, they'll either be like that or they'll be, superficial. But
Yeah.
I think in New Zealand and Australia, because most of these girls have, if not all of these girls have careers outside of pageantry, it's
Mm.
so cool to be able to connect with people that I wouldn't like, and to find a lot of tech girls in pageantry. That was also really cool in New Zealand. And I think I have my reservations because I have a very young cousin she's 16 and she's a lot like me. So I assume at some stage she's going to want to join a pageant.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just want to make sure there's not, there's bad actors in every industry,
Yeah.
but Earth and Universe, I felt so looked after. I felt like I was safe, and that's probably a misconception. I'm very happy that is not the case, especially in light of some of the things going around at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about your background. As I said to you, I'm huge into AI and tech. My background, I mean, I was in university a long time ago, but I have a background. My major was in computer science and AI specifically, and then ChatGPT came onto the scene 2, 3 years ago, and now it's AI this, AI that. I've been badgering everyone that I can get my hands on that they should know about AI, because if they don't, it's going to come for them in a bad way. Pageantry, no exception. I think a lot of people are sleeping on it. I've used it for everything, from training interview, because you can use the voice mode. I developed a medical app to help diagnose patients. And so I've been absolutely amazed at what I've been able to do with it. And you're the first person who I've interviewed who's actually been into AI, so much so that you've put it into your advocacy and who you are. So give us a bit of an idea. Give me a bit of an idea, your background in AI and how you got interested in it to begin with.
Of course. So I think in 2022, I remember using ChatGPT for the first time, late 2022, I think. And it was kind of gaining traction, but it certainly wasn't where it is now.
Yeah.
And I was kind of at a point in my life where I was like, okay, I want to try something new. I want to go more into the tech world. I'm going to build my technical skill set. So I signed up for a master's in computer science, got in, even though my background has nothing to do with computer science except for the fact I was working at a startup at that time. And kind of just fell into it. I kind of signed up for it expecting I'm going to fail all my papers and drop out after one semester. But I found I really loved the process of building and testing AI models. I mean, none to the scale that you see some things
Yeah.
occurring at, but very much in a learning capacity, right? And what I discovered through my study, because I initially wanted to kind of just have a general master's, but it kind of just fell down this AI route. And I kind of looked at the way the world was moving, and I was like, I'm really going to set myself up for success if I specialize in this. And I also enjoy it. Even when I was doing my thesis and my code kept breaking and nothing was working and all of that. But I was super fortunate, I think. Like, I think one thing that I didn't realize would come in handy as much as it did during my computer science degree was I guess, the way that I think and the way that I talk and write
Mm.
and all of those skills, which I thought had nothing to do with computer science, but really allowed me to dig deep into the technology. And a lot of my lecturers were quite impressed with how I could look at it in context and how it
Yeah.
could be applied. And I think the one paper that really interested me in AI and how it can be used to help people was I did a paper in neuroinformatics, which for context and could be for the viewers as well as yourself, but basically it's the bridge between neuroscience and artificial intelligence. So using artificial intelligence to predict brain patterns, or my focus was predicting ADHD using analyzing both like an fMRI scan, or
Yep.
a lot of them, or EEG scans, so the little things you put on
Yep.
your head. And because I myself was getting diagnosed with ADHD at the same time, it was such an interesting journey to be like, oh, this is a tool that could help give psychiatrists physiological, evidence for their diagnosis. It could make things more efficient. It could help people get the help that they need earlier. So I looked at that and I was like, okay, well, what else can I use? What else could I explore and research how AI can help people? And I kind of started a job at my previous role now, working in Māori innovations. I was like, what if I could use models that are pretty widely available to help predict business outcomes for Māori entrepreneurs at the very start of their business journey? So
Yeah.
that was my thesis. So, and then from there, everything, I was super lucky to have a supervisor who is very well known in the AI community. And through that, I was offered so many opportunities and incredible things that I got to do that kind of led to me being able to transform what was initially a bit of a rash decision into my career and everything that I kind of live and breathe. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't realize we had that in common as well with the ADHD. I got diagnosed last year. And one of the things I was interested in, I was thinking about, was I wonder how ADHD and AI sort of intersect, because I don't know if that's been your experience, but ADHD, one of the telltale signs is you get interested in so many different things. Then, you're up at 2 a.m. researching, the mating habits of beavers or something. And the thing like with ChatGPT is it makes it so easy to find out everything. Like you can't really become an expert immediately, but you can certainly get like 80% of the way there really quickly. But tell me, because there's one of my frustrations with AI, and this is sort of the path that I've been trying to carve out. There's the people who are burying their heads in the sand and just praying that the whole thing goes away. Then there's the people who are super into it and they come up with these automations, on Make or whatever, and they're 10 pages long, 100 nodes. And it's like, oh, if I do this one thing, then all these things can happen. And it's very interesting for me from a tech point of view. But an ordinary person, and I don't mean a dumb person, very intelligent people, just not into tech, will look at that and go, I have no idea what that is, and I'm not interested in it. And so I've been trying to bridge that gap, like trying to show people how AI can be used very, very practically, because there's a tendency with me to sort of get way too technical with it because I get excited by that. But I got to realize that 80-90% of people don't know about that, don't care, and I shouldn't expect them to. Right? It's like you can use a light bulb and not know how electricity works. Has that been I'm just curious where your real interest lies with it, because obviously I've seen some of the coding stuff you do. It's been a while since I've coded, but I can recognize a coding screen. But where specifically does your interest lie? Because I feel like it's somewhat similar to what I just said.
Yeah, definitely. So for context, for work, what I do is, what my team and I do is we work with enterprise to sort of look at data strategy, or now very much AI strategy as well. But obviously you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
So looking at it from a very almost macro perspective. So how do we roll this out across a company? How do we make sure that the right governance is put in place so that people aren't using it unethically or in a way that could completely compromise a company's reputation or commercials? So there's that part, of which I guess is what you just referred to in a sense, because I kind of look at it as like democratizing AI, because I think, yeah, there is a lot of people and people in my own life. And honestly, I think ever since I started studying computer science, I don't think I've gone to a family function where I haven't been bombarded with AI questions and putting many misconceptions to rest. But I think, yeah, I'm very passionate about showing how it can help and showing that it is something that is ubiquitous. It isn't
Mm.
going away as much as some people might want it to. And I also welcome people to have a different opinion from me. Like,
Yeah.
that's totally fine. But what I think is really important is, and maybe this also stems from ADHD, right? And you'll probably relate, I don't like doing admin. And if I can automate something, I will. And for me, it's been such a game changer in how I work and how I complete stuff and the quality of the work I produce. Like, because I'm really lucky, I'm at a workplace where I get Copilot and it's embedded to my entire like Microsoft. So I can
Yeah.
go, what did I do this week? Send this email to this person. And it's just like, oh, it's such a game changer. I can get so much done. But I think also, I mean, there's so many like ways I could cut this cake, right? So I could
Yeah.
go from an accessibility perspective, the way that it can make, those who live with disabilities visible or not visible. It can help their lives in so many ways. It can, I like when I used to show it to people, especially like startup entrepreneurs and stuff. I was like, look, it can create your marketing plan for you. It can do this. It can do
Mm.
that. It can help bounce off ideas. Like, if I think of a pageant specific application of AI that I've done, it's very similar to the interview sort of practice, right? Like, I pretty much prompted ChatGPT to give me my Earth Talks to practice and then give me
Mm.
feedback on those answers to get better and better and better. And obviously it learns off information. So, and it's pretty advanced. So, I mean, I could talk about this all day, but I think
Me too.
it's, yeah, yeah. And it's actually funny because I've shown AI to senior residents as well. And I think it's just about the way that I have always approached it, and to my, I guess my, like, I'd say it's like an 80% success rate. I think it's just showing them, like, it's just
Yeah.
showing them
Agree.
like what it can do. Although it was really funny, I was actually at this aged residence care or retirement village, and what I said, oh, does anyone want to put in a question for ChatGPT? And they go, oh, can you ask it what the lotto numbers are going to be tonight? And I was like, I actually can. I just don't think it's going to give me an answer you like. Um, so yeah, no, I'm very about democratizing it because I think I have one saying that I live by, and it's AI won't necessarily replace you, but someone that can
Yeah.
use it definitely will.
Yeah. I heard that and that immediately stuck with me because I think that's very, very true. And like, look, similarly to yourself, there's many ways I could cut this, and I talk about AI all the time. I think about AI all the time, always coming up with new ideas. Oh, I could do this. I could do this. It's probably the ADHD as well. But I like what you said about showing people, because I think that's really what's been missing a lot. And I think it's also really important that you meet people where they're at. So when I talk to someone who's in business, for example, my best friend is in real estate, and I will show him how AI can be applied to his specific business in a way that can help him. Now, that could be screening clients to make sure they have the right income level, whatever it is. It could even be like voice support online, and that's come so far, the voice side of things, or customer support, widget on his website. I'm just curious for yourself, when you've been going into these different places and showing different people how they could use AI. What's a general approach that you found works the best? You mentioned showing it. So let's take pageantry as an example. If there's because you're going to have this chance, you're going to be speaking to so many pageant girls during your journey of the next year. I'm just curious. Let's say, oh yeah, I've heard about this AI thing. Tell me more about it, because I can tell you from hundreds of interviews, pageant girls in general are terrible with tech. I don't understand it because they're supposed to be great at content creation. And the number of people I've had on who still can't turn on their computer boggles my mind. So if you have, the next Miss Earth, whatever, come up to you and say, oh, I heard you work in AI. I heard about this chat GPT thing. What does it do? Like, where would you start with a question like that?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I have one of two approaches. So my first instinct is to whip out my phone because I'm not always going to have my laptop on me.
Yeah.
Whip out my phone and just literally, I think the thing that people get really impressed by, especially now that it's become a lot more ubiquitous, so people have higher expectations of it. I just show them the voice function at the moment,
Yeah.
and I know that it has an intermittent video function. It comes in and out of my app, so I'm like, I'm not too sure, but even just the ability for it to research and tell you where the sources of the information that it's provided you. And I think for a lot of people, I can show it. I think it's just always leading with benefits, to be honest, because people
Yeah.
like to be incentivized to use the
Yeah.
technology, right? So if they go, oh my God, I don't even have to, like, and especially for pageant girls, right? Like, we have to have massive content pipelines. As part of the role, we have to grow our social media platforms. We have to grow our advocacy, and it just helps you springboard ideas. It helps you practice Q&A. It helps
Mm.
you, like I've even uploaded photos to it, and I assume better video capability is not very far away. Like I've even
Mm.
taken stills of my passerella and been like, what am I doing here? What should I do? Tips and tricks for that. So it's very much a tool that pageant girls should be using, because it's not like we all have a lot of time. Most of us have none.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for that specific thing, and I think also for people that come to me, and I imagine that we'll probably move on to this, but for the people who are very much against AI, I go, well, have you heard of this company? The example that always comes to my head is a company called Vico Technologies, and what they do, Vico and Vico, one of the two. What they do is they use AI, and especially in like image recognition, and they use drones to replant forests because they can mass plant seeds, or they can
Yep.
use image recognition to detect pests and have
Yeah.
traps that only open up to pests, because obviously a lot of birds in New Zealand don't fly. So it's making sure they filter that out. And I know there are so many other incredible AI startups. I mean, I could name about 20 off the top of my head, but
Mm.
yeah, I think it's always about leading with benefits and good stories, because I think there are so many bad stories, and there are so many concerns, most of which are valid. But yeah.
Well, let's go into that, because I I have been surprised at. See, people will think that AI has moved really quickly, and it has. But I've kind of been surprised by how many people still really haven't looked into it at all. And I asked ChatGPT this the other day. I got it to run a search, and it said something like 80% of people, and this is business owners specifically, 80% of people still haven't even really used ChatGPT. And to me, that absolutely boggled my mind. So I'm just because similarly to yourself, I've seen some of the benefits, and when you see some of the benefits, yes, there are definitely ethical security concerns. The environmental impact is certainly a factor as well, which we can definitely get onto because that's topical. But I'm just curious, from your experience, why do you think so many people are still sort of reluctant to give it a go?
There's a few different reasons. I think one reason is I don't think a lot of people realize how long artificial intelligence has actually been around.
Yeah,
I say to a lot of my family members, I was like, well, you guys have searched in Google before, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, that's a natural language processing algorithm. That's AI.
hmm,
Or, when you go to a parking building and you don't have to enter your plate, that's AI. Even like the simplest things like recommendations when you buy something or on Netflix, that's all AI.
yeah,
And AI, I think, is something that's seen as always has been. And I don't think the term AI is not entirely new. I mean, there's been movies and science fiction around it for a long time, but I think it's always depicted as something that's in the future and an imminent threat, rather than something that's actually been a pretty, I guess, hidden in plain sight part of technology for a very long time. And, even if you go back to things like the 60s and, Alan Turing, and as it developed from very early stage algorithms to understand the philosophical elements of like what actually is human intelligence, when does something become sentient, right
yeah,
through to when, like even playing chess on like a Windows 95 computer, like when you play against the computer, you're playing against
yeah.
AI. I just find it really interesting to sort of tell people it's always been here. It's just now
Mm.
you're seeing generative AI or agentic AI, which is obviously probably even some of like the work being done in like robotics or automated driving. I guess it scares people because it's something they haven't seen before, but when they realize it's actually something they have seen before, or AI is a broader technology, then I think comfort levels generally tend to rise and people are generally a bit more, you know, willing to try things out. I think also we're in a very interesting time where I think there's a lot of technophobia, maybe a bit of anti intellectualism on the rise. And I think it's understandable. I think things like COVID have shifted societies into a place where, people aren't very willing to try new things, or, there's a lot of sort of nationalism, populism. I won't get too
Yeah.
political here, but I think it's just an interesting shift because I think people are just, and there's a lot of reason to be scared, especially with big tech. So I think it's a bit of sort of technophobia coupled with people thinking it's an unknown technology rather than
Yeah.
realizing that it's been around pretty much a similar timeline to the internet. So
Yeah. So going into Miss Earth, I'm just curious, how are you going to combine AI with your advocacy? Because I'm going to imagine that it's going to be pretty integral to what you talk about, what you speak about.
yeah, so it's obviously something that we've been working on, and I think so. For context, for my talent, I actually built a very MVP stage AI e-waste classifier. So it classified through like your webcam, whether it was a remote or a mouse or a plug. And I definitely think I want to build more on that. And I want to build the tool and make it kind of scalable to use
Hmm.
with a company that processes e-waste, because it can help make their lives easier. And it's an example, because I think for me, the biggest thing is I want to show the examples of how AI can help the environment, because I want to lead with benefits first. And
Yeah.
I fully want to recognize the issues that it poses for sure. But I also want to show some of the work that gets done in the AI sustainability space. I'm very fortunate to work very closely with the AI Forum of New Zealand, and one of the initiatives that it does is it's an AI for the environment hackathon. So groups come together and they think of business ideas that use AI to benefit the environment.
Oh.
And some of the idea, like there was a group of primary school children that entered last year. It was crazy and they were incredible. So I think for me, it's just really showing the benefits it can have and showing that, and I want to have a tangible piece of, I guess, tech that highlights my advocacy. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be working a lot on trying to build that model out, and whether it stays in the realm of e-waste or it can even expand to just normal waste, and is something I not only want to do for my advocacy and to show the Miss Earth organization, like, here's something I've done, this is the impact it's had, and this is kind of where I'd want to go with it, but also because it's I guess, my way of giving back and using the skills that I have to help the climate crisis. Obviously, being in Miss Earth, there are a lot of scientists, and I don't have
Mm.
that skill set, but what I do have is this particular skill set and the knowledge to look at the code and make sure it works, but also use AI to help create the code as well. So
Yeah.
showing that it can be a very full circle solution, and it feeds into a lot of, I think, an industry that we call clean tech, right? It feeds into a lot more sustainable consumption, and also exploring and connecting with people in the, I guess, the tech ecosystem that look at, more efficient energy sources and optimizing energy usage from data centers, which aren't only
Yeah.
integral to AI, but actually integral to just using technology as,
Mm.
as a starting point. So yeah, that's definitely, I think, on my horizon right now. I think it would be super cool to see how that initiative evolves. But yeah.
That I think that that's the first time I've heard of anyone doing something like that for talent. I mean that's very cool because it's very rare. After doing so many interviews, it's very rare that I get surprised. I think that's an amazing idea. I mean, I've heard about people doing dance, reading poetry, reading a book they've published, singing, all this stuff. But I don't think anyone's ever debuted like a tech app or an AI app. So just to clarify, you say e-waste. So e-waste being old phones, old laptops, things like that, batteries. And then your app will look at it and then is it like safe disposal or like best ways to get rid of it in an environmentally friendly manner? What will be the output?
Yeah, so the initial output I have at the moment is just classifying it and sort of telling you where you would categorize it at the moment. But definitely, I think because I now have the amazing opportunity of building the model out even further, I definitely want to add, like, it categorizes it, it classifies it, that's one thing, but for it to go, okay, this is where you need to dispose of it, these are the materials that are in it to be careful of. So yeah, definitely on that safe disposal piece, because I think that's not only cool and it's a cool way to develop the model further, it's actually really practical and something that helps
Hmm.
people who do want to manage e-waste, because that's one of the biggest problems with e-waste, right? It's people, it requires quite a niche skill set to be able to dismantle it properly and dispose of the materials in the right way and manage it. And in New Zealand, maybe a couple of months ago now, there in an e-waste production, like no, e-waste management facility, that's what you
Yeah.
call it, it caught on fire because, I mean, the cause is unknown, but I think, with the toxins in the air, it was obviously quite impactful for those in
Yeah.
surrounding areas. And obviously, it kind of just really highlights the need for more work to be done in that area. I'm not saying it's their fault, but obviously, it's a very sensitive, and I mean
Yeah.
sensitive in the way that the materials are quite flammable or poisonous.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, if that's my one way I can help contribute to, making the world a safer and greener place, then yeah, that's kind of where I want to go with it.
I think it's very cool because it's very different. And I think there's many different ways that people can help the environment. I'm just curious, have you given it a name yet? Or is that like way down the track? Because you can't share that yet? Is it a hidden secret?
No, not a hidden secret. I think it's just called AI e-waste classifier at the moment, but I should give it a name.
That's
Oh,
you might want to work on that name a little bit. Give it
yeah,
something a bit catchier. You're going into pageantry. It needs to have a cute name, probably starting with I. It's like iPhone, iPad. It's got to be I
yeah.
something. I don't know. Um, but let me ask you this, because one of the weird things with AI, specifically the newer like LLMs and agentic and all this stuff, I found that it works very well with my brain, and I've started thinking that I must think like a machine or a computer because to get I say that to get the best results out of AI, it's all down to your prompt. It's like the quality of your prompt determines the quality of your outcome. And I found that a lot of people struggle to know what to put in. Now, some of that is just it's a new thing. But what I really like doing, especially playing with longer prompts when I'm creating something like an app or a custom GPT, and it's this problem solving. It's like you've got this problem, real world problem that you want to solve. For example, it could be e-waste. But it's like, what's the outcome that I want? And then how do I structure my prompt or my query in such a way that the AI can understand it and deliver me the best result? So I'm just curious, have you always kind of had that problem solving mindset or mentality? Because I think it was the CEO of NVIDIA, he said like English is a new programming language. And I thought that's really, really true because yes, you still want to be able to code, but now you're using natural language to program an AI. So have you always sort of had that brain that works in like almost like a computer way?
I think so. I think if you ask my mum, she'd definitely say yes.
Yeah.
And I think when obviously going through the process of being diagnosed with ADHD, I learned a lot about what it is and what it
Yeah.
means for me, and probably in a sense what it means I probably should do to
Yeah.
obviously work the best with the way my brain works. obviously AI is such a dynamic, fast-paced, ever-changing, whatever adjective you want to throw at it,
Yeah.
space. And I think for me that really works because I think I thrive when I think on my feet. I think I thrive when my brain is searching for something really quickly and under pressure. And I do think that I think quite logically in that sense
Yeah.
of, I guess, prompt engineering has never been something I've struggled with. I
Yeah.
think it's always been something, and I think it's just because I, I guess I treat it as like I explain to it the level of information I would want to know, which is always a lot. So I try and give it as much context as possible. And yeah, I definitely think I agree with that statement. English is the new programming language, and it's really highlighted, I think, the need for, how would I say this, communication skills, but obviously not to another person, but to a machine. And, you know, I guess, yeah, I have always thought like that. And I've actually never looked at it like that. I've kind of looked at it more from the sense of like, yeah, I have a fast brain, so I need a
Yeah.
fast
Yeah.
job, a fast industry. So yeah, no, it's definitely like that. I think when you, I, I'm trying to just think of like a good metaphor to use, but basically, like, I just, every time you prompt, even though models like ChatGPT and your Claudes and whatnot obviously learn information about you,
Mm.
I always treat it every time like it just doesn't know what I'm talking about. You know, you've got to give it as much
Yeah.
information as possible or reference what you know about me, what we've learned about me so far, what
Yeah.
conversations we've had. So, yeah, totally.
It's funny because prompt engineering is this relatively recent term. And I think there was that meme going around. I can't remember exactly what it was, Shay, but it's like, what, you mean it's hard? And like that was my response when I thought about prompt. I heard, oh, prompt engineering. Everyone's going to, this is a new big career. And I'm like, what, like you people can't do it for yourself? And it was weird because I think it might be the ADHD thing, but also it's a communication because I think in order to get what you really want from it, to get the best result, you do need to communicate very, very clearly in English. And I think that's been something that maybe is fallen by the wayside in this day and age where people have forgotten how to structure a sentence because everything is memes and emojis and like that probably won't work for a chat GPT. You've mentioned some of the concerns and look, obviously there are a lot of concerns that people have around AI. What are for your from your side, what are some of the big concerns that people have with AI, environmental or otherwise?
Yeah, so there's the environmental ones, obviously, the cost of energy and, the toxins inside, you know, motherboards and
Yeah.
batteries and so on and so forth. But I think moving beyond that, I think there's a lot of fear that it will, for lack of a better word, take over. And I think it's because, I wonder if it's because generating information in the way that a lot of generative AI, LLMs, so on and so forth, do, especially when you look at it from like an image and video production perspective. I think it's that uncanny valley, right? Like it looks so real, but it doesn't at the same time. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
fear around, well, is it coming for me next? And obviously, everyone's opinion on this varies. Mine is that we are quite a way away from that. And I think there's a few concerns that obviously stem from that as well. Like, is it going to take my job? The workforce is changing. That also
Yeah.
doesn't help when it comes in at the start, like during a recession. So that I think
Mm.
that fuels that sort of economic uncertainty. But in addition to that, I think it's also, yeah, that uncanny valley. But we're in an age where there's so much information and AI creates information, or generative AI to be exact,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of misinformation. And I think because now with generative AI, and you see it when you do like a corporate phishing course or something like that, or like a cybersecurity course, because I think people are, they can't trust the information they get, regardless of whether it says it's from a reputable source or not, because
Yeah.
things are becoming so easy to imitate, and especially for nefarious reasons. I think that fuels a lot of concern around artificial intelligence. But I mean, I always look at it as artificial intelligence and any technology for that matter, whether it's the internet or cryptocurrency or anything like that, it's all about the people that use it at the end of the day. Um, Bad actors will always be bad actors, and now they just have more tools to be bad actors, and they
Yeah.
can scale the actions that they take. And obviously, we've seen that in the news with a lot of sort of scams and whatnot. But also at the same time, AI can help detect scams
Yeah.
before a human does. So
Yeah.
it's, I think that's where a lot of the concerns stem from, is just there's so much information, people are overwhelmed, and yeah, I think when you look at a lot of the trends around the world, especially a lot of, I think what kind of started to get at people is obviously a lot of companies started laying off a lot of people because they're like, oh, I can replace all these people with AI. The efficacy of which I'm not here to debate, but I would argue it's, varying levels.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think a lot of the concerns, there's almost like a cocktail of reasons why they're valid or not valid as well. So yeah.
Yeah. I think I saw a story just this week or last week that there was a large company who had laid off a lot of employees and replaced basically all of them with AI. And then the AI sort of started malfunctioning and didn't work so well. People were really, really fed up with getting stuck in like endless loops. And so the company lost millions or billions of dollars in valuation and then needed to suddenly bring its employees back. I think there's going to be a back and forth between this. Trying to automate some stuff will be better, some stuff won't work as well. But it's kind of like, for me, it's like when the car came out, the horse-drawn cart. Yeah, if you owned a horse-drawn cart business that wasn't looking so good all of a sudden, or it's like, Netflix when it came out and then, bankrupted Blockbuster, because it's just the way that we're moving. Let me ask you this. So just examples, because I always like keeping it very practical when it comes to AI. So let me run you through some examples, and let's start with a pageant girl, and let's assume that these people know how to use tech, but they're not coders, they're not tech savvy, they have no interest in prompt engineering and whatnot. But so with a pageant girl, what are some of the ways that she could use, from your point of view? What's some of the ways that she could use AI to automate, or to get more creative, or to get more efficient?
I think I'll start with one that's maybe, I guess, a little bit unconventional.
Okay.
Obviously, in pageantry, one thing I've learned, and this is probably my like business background coming out as well, personal branding is 99% of the work. And that manifests through everything from the way that you look to your passerella to your styling to everything, to your social media content. When I went for Miss Earth, because went for Miss Universe New Zealand, had a lot of learnings about what
Yeah.
I needed to improve, and I kind of info dumped on ChatGPT, and I was just like, what are the levers I can pull to create a really strong personal brand? What are what are the things I should work on based on this feedback I have? Or so I think using it to help build your personal brand is probably one of the most fundamental ways I would always suggest a pageant girl to use it. And you can use ChatGPT. It's super, obviously quite user-friendly and simple to use. So I think just using it to inform everything from, you know, what you think your color palette is to what are the topics you should talk about,
Yeah.
content strategies, social media calendars, real ideas, TikToks, posts, all of that. I think that's probably where I'd start, because it manifests into so many other different parts of
Mm.
being a pageant girl. Because if, I'm really fortunate. My best friend has an amazing passerella. She's so good at it. And she wanted work on her public speaking. And obviously I do it a lot, but I wanted pastorella training, so we were training each other. But
Yeah.
one thing I think comes to mind is I sat down with her, and instead of going back and forth, I was, asking her, who are you? Why are you here? And you can talk to ChatGPT and get those things, and that feeds
Mm.
into your Q&A, because
Yeah.
sometimes instead of rehearsing answers, it's easier to just remember key points about yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, depending on the pageant, right? I mean,
Sure.
Earth talks can often be quite technical in nature. You need to remember policy, stats, all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's probably the first and most important way, because if you aren't very confident or unsure about your personal brand, your social media is going to be quite confusing. Every choice you make's not going to be grounded in a really strong idea of who you are. And that's getting very philosophical. So yeah, that's probably the way I would suggest it.
I like that. I think that's a great place to start. And the benefit of something like that is you can do that via voice mode. So you can do it whilst you're driving. You can do it whilst you're running on the treadmill at the gym. It's so funny you mentioned the color palette because I literally just did that yesterday. It's like which you laugh, but I literally did it yesterday. Which colors best go with which skin complexions and hair combinations, and it was drawing images, photorealistic images of various combinations with a color of dress on it. So it's funny you mentioned that. What about if we take another example? Let's take something that people would go, okay, there's no way AI could help this sort of person. Why don't we take a fish and chip shop? Is there any way that someone running your local neighborhood fish and chip shop and has been doing so for 10, 20 years, could they use AI?
Great question. And I think the thing that's just come to my mind is uploading your pricing and being like, am I charging enough? Are my
Hmm.
prices reflecting the cost of things? Are they reflecting other businesses in the area? It's always, yeah, I think honestly it's I think one of the best use cases for our small businesses and solopreneurs, because it gives you access to that advice that you'd have to pay a lot of money for otherwise, and that wouldn't make sense to pay that money for that person. And I think it's really important, especially if you're considering, taking pageantry seriously or building a business, to get someone that can mentor you,
Hmm.
because there are things that, I recognize the limitations of AI. And as much as like my previous example of building a personal brand, sometimes you want to be in front of a person to do that. You want to bounce that idea from a real human person, because you don't, AI can give you the springboard, but you're not entirely sure if that connects, right, with a
Yeah.
human.
Yeah.
And I think with the fish and chip shop example, right, it just democratizes that information for someone that, previously it would be actually quite hard to understand that unless you went to every single fish and chip store in the area
Yeah.
and took down their prices, or, and everything from that to even like, copywriting or, what are some ways, I can get some more business, things like that. But I think the pricing one's probably the most tangible example I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I like that one. I was helping out a shoe repair shop. I don't know if you have them in New Zealand, but the guys who cut keys and still polish shoes. I was like, how can I use AI to help someone like this? And he's like 70, 80 years old. I don't think he even has a computer. He barely has a smartphone. And we got into the marketing for him, like how to get creating a continuity program. And so it's interesting because I don't know if a lot of people will know this. I'm sure you do, but it's very creative because there's so many different ways you can use it, and no two people are going to use it in the same way. Um, let's take one final use case. What about a student? Let's say a uni student, and let's say, for example, a uni student who has ADHD. And classically, with ADHD, they find it pretty hard to sit down, focus on something, particularly if it's in the written format, because it's a bit too slow. They get distracted, whatnot. How could, let's say, a uni student who's struggling with ADHD use AI to help make help them perform better at uni?
It's a very pertinent example
I was
because
going to
about
say it might be.
6 months ago, that was me.
Yeah.
For me, I never used it to write my essays or anything like that, and I don't advocate for that because I don't actually think. For me, I was like, I don't think that's close to the work that me or some of
Yeah.
my friends around uni could create. What I did use it for is when doing my thesis or doing assignments, there are obviously GPTs built into ChatGPT, one of them being, I think it's called Scholar AI or something
Yep,
like
I know
that.
that one. Yep.
Yeah, so I actually use that to collect papers for me. I
Mm.
used it to build tables that gave me, the title, the author, key themes covered in the journal article or editorial paper. I gave it the
Yeah.
category as well, like whether it's a conference, what did it cover? How is it relevant to my research question? It just gave me this massive list of papers that I didn't have to go find myself. I didn't have to go fully read myself. Once I built that list, I did go through and read those. And, I'd use, I think my university had like you can interact with PDFs. So I'd ask it questions like, where does it
Mm.
mention a recurrent neural network? Or where
Mm.
does it mention, this or that? And it would give me the answer. And obviously you want to verify it for
Yeah.
accuracy, but
Yeah.
I think it really streamlines a process which would have taken me weeks
Yeah.
into a couple of days, and that those couple of days was largely spent with me going through the papers and deriving really useful insights for
Mm.
my work. So that's definitely a way I'd use. I think I was telling a friend, and she's like, I didn't know you could do that, and I was like, girl, you're going to save so much time because I love learning, and I actually quite enjoyed writing when I was I'd go through waves with it, but it just helped make everything so much easier because I didn't have to trawl through irrelevant articles.
Yeah. I recommended that exact same Scholar AI GPT to another pageant girl who was studying medicine. She is studying medicine, and she had to do a paper, and she has to find all the references. And I said, why don't you give this a go? And then, a couple of weeks later, I heard back from her. She said, oh, that changed my life because it saved her so much. She didn't use it to write. And I agree with you. I think the essay writing, it looks very generic, like it's grammatically correct, but it's just still missing a certain something. But the Scholar AI saved her so much time in doing that. She also has ADHD, by the way, and it saved her so much time. Just for the people watching, do you want to clarify what Scholar AI actually does? Because I think this is important. It doesn't. It's not something that writes your paper for you. Do you want to tell the people watching what it does?
Yeah, of course. So Scholar AI, you guys can give me a commission later. What they
We're
do
taking
is,
sponsorships.
yeah, totally right. So what it does is it searches across the world's most, I guess, reputable journal article, conference, scientific research platforms, and it trawls through these platforms and gets you the relevant papers you might need for your research question. Obviously, that the efficacy does require you to, give it context about what you're looking for,
Yeah.
but it basically cuts out that sort of, the time spent trying to find things. And it also, you can prompt it to give you summaries of the papers and the years, and you can filter it and prompt go, I want it from this year to this year, I want it to cover these things, and it just gives you the papers, it gives you the titles, it gives you the links to them.
Mm.
Often, even if you don't have like the access to certain databases, it will just give you a link to the PDF, which I think is such a game changer. And yeah, it just collects paper. It does that job that no one wants to do for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I had my friend was researching ADHD and in particular the incidence of ADHD in younger women and whether it goes underdiagnosed or not. So not only was she looking up papers, but you can ask it, is there any research that shows
Yeah.
hypothesis? And it will go through those entire databases and find papers, yay or nay, whichever one you want to look at. I'm just curious for yourself, as someone who obviously is very into this, it's like your daily, so to speak. What are your, you know how pageant girls, they will have their must have things they need to take, in the makeup kit or whatever. What are your like go to AI apps that you're using at least, a couple of times a week, if not like every day, outside of Chat GPT, because everyone knows that. What are your go to AI apps?
Ooh, good question. I think I use Copilot a lot,
Yeah.
obviously for work. I kind of go through phases. Like I do really like Claude for
Hmm.
certain tasks, especially it's quite good at writing. I quite liked DeepSeek as well.
Yeah.
I was using it's funny, when I was at uni, I was actually using Gemini for business quite a lot because it had really good folder summary capabilities. So I was getting it to read 200, 150 to 200 literature, pieces of academic literature for me, and pulling out themes and creating tables for me and creating docs. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of the AI tools I use are generally embedded into other ones, which is amazing, right? Because of the
Yeah.
interoperability, because you can just go, okay, I'm in Microsoft, make me this email, make me this document. I think a tool, and it's funny because obviously I have to do a lot of content creation, and I think CapCut's like AI abilities are really good as well, especially their captions and auto cut and things like that. So that's definitely one I rely on a lot, and probably something that I guess wouldn't necessarily be in my life if it wasn't for pageantry. And yeah, so I tend to have a play around with things, but
Yeah.
I get asked a lot what my favorite tool is, and I generally always go back to ChatGPT just because it is so applicable to so many different things.
Yeah.
And I've tried metas, I've tried TikToks, I've tried all of that, and they're good and they have their own purpose. But yeah, I think I don't do a lot of image generation in AI, so I don't use a lot of those. But I have played around with like AI video editing tools as well. So
Yeah.
and yeah, definitely use ChatGPT probably like well, every day, obviously, but I don't even know how much time I spend using it. But but yeah, I do tend to have a tinker around and see what works. I think I was using DeepSeek quite a lot when I was coding more. And
Yeah.
obviously I was really impressed by it because I was like, to think that this is like all open source and so yeah, that was great. And just trying to think of any ones that have stood out to me. Like I've used most of them, but
I mean that's a fairly comprehensive list. I mean, but I mean again, ChatGPT can do a lot. I mean, I've been blown away by the latest, because you speak about image generation. The latest image generation that's baked into ChatGPT is stunning because it can now render text. It can render reflection, so you can actually now make logos using AI, whereas before the text was just a joke. It was terrible.
yeah.
So I've had a lot of fun using that. Talk to me about DeepSeek, because I know somewhere in your bio you mentioned data sovereignty, and DeepSeek, whichever political way you want to lean, it was from China, so there were questions over data sovereignty, and you've mentioned it as being important to yourself. So for the folks watching at home, again, do you want to say what you tell them what data sovereignty is and why it's a concern?
Yeah. So and I think people have their own definitions, but the way I look at data sovereignty is it's sort of an overarching set of principles that give you control over the collection, management, storage, usage, and the entire life cycle of your data. And I think while people think it's quite a techie thing, it
Mm.
actually relates to, everything from the the data that social media websites have on you through searches or interactions or posts, right through to things like your government records, your health records,
Yeah.
and looking at, I guess, the sovereignty or the ownership. I think ownership's a really crucial word here that you
Yeah.
may or may not have over that data. And it's really interesting you bring up data sovereignty because in New Zealand, there's a lot of discourse around Māori data sovereignty because there's a lot of discourse around data as what we call a taonga or a treasure. And it's something that's viewed, and in my eyes, I view it in the same respect that I would view the land. Who does it belong to? Who's owning my data or your data or, my family's data? And how do we interact with it? And there's a lot of Māori principles that sort of interact with the way that we look after data. So really obvious one is what we call kaitiakitanga or guardianship. So that looks at, ownership, who takes care of it, who's accountable for taking care of it,
Yeah.
And making sure that, I guess, all of those aspects of collection, ownership, management, are those actions taken with, the best interests of who the data pertains to, who the data is about, or who may have rights to own it as well and make decisions about it. So for me, data sovereignty is important, but I also recognize that I think there's a lot of there's a lack of informed consent around a lot of the data that is stored about us. And I'm not going to say it's anyone's fault. I think because things develop so rapidly, there almost wasn't even enough time to think about it. It definitely is a concept I think has come a bit retrospectively. And an ideal state in my eyes is just not possible. It would be great. And I really found it interesting, a lot of the research done around blockchain and how that can help with data sovereignty. But I think in terms of DeepSeek and obviously, the geopolitical tensions and, China owning that data, I think it's also a similar thing to TikTok, right? I think back to, scandals involving, Western big tech companies, obviously Cambridge Analytica, right? And you think, I think there's a lot of the Chinese might own my data, but also at one point, Americans own my data, and was that taken care of properly? And it's a very huge conversation that comes up with a lot of iwi or Māori tribes in New Zealand, especially around where it's stored and whether that should be stored on a local server. You can get really, really technical with it. But ultimately, I think there are some parts of me, and this, not waving my white flag, but I have, growing up in the digital age, there's a lot of information I've ceded sovereignty to simply because, and I think it's a trade-off, and I think it's a trade-off people can think about, there are functions within many large language model tools that don't send your model, your information back to the training model. But ultimately, I think it's up to someone to be like, am I willing to make this trade-off? Am I willing to do this? It's super philosophical.
I'm in the same boat with you in terms of the white flag. I think that's kind of a really apt metaphor for it, because I think if you want to live in the digital age, because the digital age grew faster than the safeguards, and AI is going to be the same, right? Because it's growing so quickly, and it's only looking retrospectively, they go, oh, we should have, maybe not done this, but it's growing so quickly that was never going to realistically happen. And I think the trade-off to live in today's modern age is that, some of your data is going to go out. I mean, there are companies that now specialize in retrieving your details and your data, and will go and write legal letters to these companies to say, you got to delete my data. But I think there's another double challenge here, which is this is a very nuanced and in some ways a very technical conversation. And so, ordinary people have their data, maybe it's medical data, it's very confidential or personal, but to try to explain to them exactly the importance of data sovereignty, it's very difficult, because they would first have to understand why it's so important. And that can take a lot of time. They might not understand why it's a big deal. So I'm just curious, in your work in terms of Maori data sovereignty, has that also been part of the problem, is that you need to explain why it's so important in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. I would say general population, very low data literacy. And that's not anybody's fault. That's just the way the cookie is crumbled.
Yeah.
I think especially, and there are a lot of socioeconomic historical factors that contribute to this, but
Mm.
data sovereignty is one of those topics where, a lot of people don't know what it is. A lot of people don't know what it means. And honestly, a lot of people don't care. And
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's a hard one for me because I think, yeah, in the Māori world, there's been quite a few seminal pieces of work that have been done to sort of bring this Western framework to the Māori worldview. And I think it translates pretty easily. You think of its pretty core principles like respect, collective identity, and guardianship, the relationship data has to other pieces of data, or things like that. However, there's a lot of I, it's hard to say because I think there's a lot of competing interests in
Yeah.
a lot of people's lives just in general, but when you look at the Māori population, there's even more competing interests, and there's, I think, a lot of the discussion around Māori rights and the way that we are afforded or not afforded things is generally seen as something that's, we interact with the physical world. Like a lot of the discussions around like the use of the ocean for fisheries and the land for farming and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. And I mean, I could get into this topic all day, but there's a lot of in Te Ao Māori, obviously there's iwi, and these iwi are historically very well established institutions. And I think because there's been a lot of historical payouts, due to Treaty of Waitangi settlements, there's been a lot of investment into physical forms of, generating revenue, whether that's through forestry or,
Yeah.
um, aquaculture and whatnot. But there hasn't historically been a ton of investment into tech. And I think it's because there's a knowledge gap.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a knowledge gap in New Zealand. There's actually a very small proportion of Māori in tech. And it's a thing that so many incredible people have worked towards, bridging that gap. But yeah, I think in the Māori world, it stems from, I guess, a lot of competing interests, but also historical factors such as, you know, knowledge gaps, educational gaps, socioeconomic gaps, so on and so forth. So,
Do you think we need to bring more AI and tech education into schools? Because there is that gap. And, the gap is only going to get bigger as AI accelerates. And my fear is there's going to be a big gap between the haves and the have nots. Because I think if you know how to use AI and use it effectively, particularly as a business person, I mean, if you're not the most ethical person, you talk about competing interests, you have a massive leg up. If you know how to use AI, you can advance your interests. The other people will have no idea what's happened until it's too late. So, in terms of educating the general populace, do you think this is something that we need to get into schools? Is this something that we just generally need more AI education available? Or what's going to be the sort of the solution for bridging that gap?
yeah, I mean, the solution's multidimensional, right? But
Yeah.
if we talk about education, then yes, I totally believe that there needs to be, you almost need to embed it from a very early age about what it means to use artificial intelligence, and it's one thing to use it, and it's one thing to know what it is, and it's one thing to sort of make your life easier from it. But I think it's another thing to understand the ethics around it, what you should and shouldn't do with people's data. And I think those are probably some really important things to teach as well. Because I think, as we've seen, right, and you can speak to this from your experience at university and in tech, I think it's going to be less important to know things like how to code, but more important to understand the contextual factors of technology. And I think, to be fair, that's why I did manage to get first class honours, was not because of my coding skills, which I would argue are relatively subpar, but because I could look at it and be like, yeah, this is what it means. This is, why people should care about it. And I always looked at it from a very commercial sense, but I think
Yeah.
for, yeah, and understanding how it can help you economically, like, and I mean, there's so much amazing work being done by so many organizations of getting more people into tech, because ultimately having not just the tech skills but the way that you think in technology, it's going to be it's part of every single industry already, regardless of whether you
Yeah.
go into anything. I think having really core foundational tech and AI knowledge is
Mm.
so important. Whether the Ministry of Education takes my advice or not is another matter, but yeah.
I think it's really interesting because I agree with you. It's not so much knowing how to code now. I think it's almost like a way of thinking. And I think you need to be very comfortable with having this sort of worldview that includes tech and AI, because if not, I think you're at such a massive disadvantage now. I mean, you can access so many of these things, at least, in the Western world for free. You can start up a free chat GPT account, OpenAI account. And I often say it's like having the smartest person in the world in your pocket. You can ask it anything and it will know the answer. There are people using it for life coaching, business coaching, and the sky is really the limit. And it's almost like the only limit is your own creativity. And I think it's been really interesting to see how many different things have come out from AI. And I think that's only going to accelerate over the next year or 5 years. Can I ask you, just with regards future, and this is completely unfair of me to ask, where do you see this going in, like, I don't want to say even like 10 years is way too far. Where do you think we're going to end up in 5 years? Have you given this any thought? Because every week, like I subscribe to a few AI newsletters and it's like every day it's like, oh my God, this happened, this happened, this happened. But like a year from now or 5 years from now, how do you think the world's going to look different because of AI?
I think at a very, I guess, not technical but tangible level, I think we're going to see, and it's something that's already happening, right? I think we're going to see more interaction between different systems to sort of streamline AI's usage,
Yeah.
bringing in different data. There's been a lot of work in agentic AI that I think is, because ultimately I think a really important thing to consider here is not just the development itself, it's what is the use case for the development, because
Yeah.
ultimately we can have lots of innovation, but unless the innovation's useful, I don't personally see it being, the widespread
100%.
adoption.
Yeah.
And I think you can make that argument, and like, I'm very interested in cryptocurrency and blockchain, but ultimately it was a solution that came before a problem or a recognition of a problem.
Yeah.
And because it wasn't something that was so easily applicable like generative AI is, it didn't get the same amount of traction. And I say this as someone who sees immense potential in blockchain technology, but I think the biggest growth is going to be in ways that AI, makes things easier. So agentic AI, I think we're going to see some pretty cool developments in robotics, because
Mm.
obviously robotics is something that is immensely helpful. Very, it's still quite difficult to get robots to imitate human movement, but
Yeah.
ultimately with more work and more investment, then it gets the platform it needs to grow. I'm sure there are lots of different sectors of many different things, technology or not, that could be developed more, but because there's not the resources available, it won't. I think, I mean, we've already seen this already, right? With the rise of, art of like AI influences and content, and
Mm.
I think there's going to be, and I think in parallel with that, there's going to be a lot more sophistication in social media platforms, or, the recognition of AI is going to get even better as the AI
Yeah.
gets better, because those two things kind of run in
Yeah.
tandem.
Yeah.
So I think that the future, I mean, it also depends, right? Because I think the future depends on a couple of things. Whether a technology is given the resources to develop into something that's completely groundbreaking or not, or whether, the use case for it is I guess, universal or, enough of a benefit to someone that would be investing to it to continue.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because I think in tandem there, and I'm already seeing it, there's a very big move towards less screens, simpler phones, things like that. And I think there'll always, there's always going to be a counterculture of anti-technology. And sometimes I'm even anti-screens. Like there have been times where I'm like, nah, I'm turning everything off and I'm going for a walk. I think it'll be very interesting to see. I think it'll just be growing ubiquity, right, in your daily life. What I don't see happening, but also I could be completely wrong, that's the sort of breakneck pace that we advance at, right, in this space. I don't see, any Skynet like situations happening anytime soon.
Yeah.
I, I think I've said this quite a lot. I think there are a lot of industries which I think are going to prevail throughout. And I mean, you mentioned this earlier with the invention of the car, and I think I saw an example of like the invention of the fridge meant that there were delivery men that would deliver ice to people's houses to keep things
Yeah.
cool. So that changed. I think we're going to see a lot of fundamental shifts. I think,
Yeah.
especially in the white collar space, there are going to
Mm.
be a lot of shifts towards different jobs. There's going to be a lot more sort of quality assurance jobs rather than maybe pure software programming. So I think there's going to be incremental but quite fundamental shifts in the labor market, in the way that we operate, in and I do, unfortunately, and as much as I try and other people try, there is a bit of a digital divide, and I think that will continue. Unfortunately, I think it's always going to be an issue that we're dealing
Yeah.
with. But yeah, that's sort of
Yeah.
my brief prediction.
So basically, now would be a really good time to get familiar with AI, is what you're saying.
Pretty much, yeah. Now, it's really funny working in or like studying and working in the space that I'm in, because people constantly ask me, what's the best thing to invest in? Like what's the next Nvidia? And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, I don't think I'd be telling you.
that's
I mean,
that's that's fair enough. But I don't even know if Nvidia really knew what was going to happen, because
exactly.
Nvidia was graphics cards for video games, and the reason they developed that way was because of video games like graphics processing. So, I mean, his company has gone ballistic through the roof, but I don't think any one of us, I think the moral of the story here is I don't think any one of us really knows what the future is going to look like. But I think for the individual person watching or listening to this, the main thing really is you have to start getting familiar with AI, because it's not going anywhere. I think the genie really is out of the bottle. And I really want, the ordinary person at home, the ordinary solopreneur, hardworking business person, maybe it's a single mum or whatever it is. I really want, because that digital divide, I think it's either going to get a lot worse for you, or if you're intelligent about it, this is your chance to reel that divide in and maybe come up on the winning side of that divide. And that for me, it's not like I have no interest in making big companies bigger, but having ordinary people who maybe have a hidden superpower, whether it's ADHD or creativity, and using AI to leverage that now in a way that you never could have done before, because now you can scale so quickly, you can be so productive. I think that's really where I see the opportunity, and that for me is what I get excited about. Is taking someone, an ordinary person who's not a tech genius. I'm not a tech genius, but showing them how to use AI, get comfortable with that, and then create something that they never could have done probably 5 or 10 years ago. So it's going to be a fascinating next year, five, yeah, who knows? I mean, I don't know how long ChatGPT has been out. It hasn't been out for that long. But tell me this just before we get to the close, because we've all been on for almost an hour and a half already, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface. What do you do to stay sane? Like hobbies, like when you do need to get away from the screen, what do you do?
Yeah, because I found this especially when going through my thesis, right? Is I wanted to get away from a screen, so to get that peace, to get that
Yeah,
space, there were a few things, and I think working out is one of them. I think there's nothing more soothing to me than only focusing on my body, using
Mm.
my mind to connect with my body, not using my mind to think about concepts or run through things 3 million times, but to just truly connect to my physical self. And exercise in all different forms. I mean, I love lifting heavy and I love getting strong, but obviously I do a variety of things. I loved swimming while I was doing my thesis because I couldn't take anything into the water with me. There's no
Yeah.
music, no phone, nothing. So it was just me in the water, you know, doing my laps. And I think, yeah, definitely moving your body is something that's really important. And I don't just say this for aesthetics and, as someone who is competing in beauty pageants, although that's a big part of it, I say it
Yeah.
as someone who's actually really into, I'm into working out because of my mental health. I'm into working out because it's something I get to do for myself. It's my
Mm.
selfish time. I think also connecting with people, really. I think, I mean, I'm getting older now. My parents are getting older, so it's always been really lovely to see them and hang out with my relatives, especially after my win. Like, it was so nice. The next day I was like, I'm going to see my family. There's nothing else that I
Yeah.
want to do right now to celebrate. I didn't want to go
Yeah.
out and party or anything. I just wanted to, hang out with people I love, whether that's my partner or my family or my friends who are my family essentially. And I mean, I'm also lucky. I live with two golden retrievers and a German shepherd. So if all else fails, I just go to them because the minute they know that they can get some attention from me, it's all consumed with various chew toys and running around and yeah. So and like yeah, I think that's the way I kind of do it is just it's almost like I think we're in a world, especially in pageantry, where we're giving so much of ourselves, and even you as an interviewer, right? You're giving so much of yourself to other people. So I think it's really important as pageant queens or as people that work in anything really to take time for yourself
Yeah.
and to whatever that's through. For me, it's exercising and hanging out with dogs. So
I think that's a pretty solid plan. I will say just before we get to the final 10, this was before I got diagnosed with ADHD. I took up really heavy lifting, Olympic lifting, and I had always viewed like during school people who lift weights, we call them meatheads, like they're dumb, they're thick, and I fell in love with it. And bear in mind, this is before I knew I had ADHD. My brain was always on overdrive. And people would talk about meditation. I even took on a meditation teacher. Could not do it because you sit there in the lotus position. You're supposed to focus on your breathing, and my brain would keep going, and then it would start feeling bad about keeping going because you're supposed to be thinking about nothing. So then it would be thinking about why am I not thinking about nothing, but the having to lift a heavy weight for me, it was like meditation. It was so freeing because if you don't concentrate when you're deadlifting 100 or 150, whatever it is, the weight's going to flatten you. So it demands your attention in a way it was so peaceful. I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, that was my meditation. I played tennis today. That's also my meditation because all I can think about is I got to run there, I got to hit the ball. And I can't meditate, but I can do those two things. And for me, that's my form of meditation. So I don't know if you found the same with lifting heavy weights, but that was a case for myself.
I don't think I've ever felt more seen than I just did because I too, like, I try meditation and I think it's an incredible practice. I just
Yeah.
can't do it very well. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not very good at it at all. Whereas, yeah, you're right, like when you're lifting a heavy weight, something I'm probably going to have to start winding down as I get closer to the earth stage, unfortunately. But when you're lifting that heavy weight, you have to think about only that. Otherwise, you're going to injure yourself. Like, and it's not like I cut myself. Like, this is potential to paralyze me. So.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way about swimming, and I used to feel the same way, and I even feel the same way now. Like, I used to feel about dancing and being on stage and just
Mm.
connecting with myself, and that was a really hard thing for me to connect back to when I started doing pageantry is, like when I'm past it, like I've finally got to this point with Passerella where I'm like, I'm on stage, I'm in flow state, like everything's
Mm.
clicking, and it's, like this is a privilege for me to be able to do this. Like I get to show you guys not just like my body or my face or, all the superficial things, but I get to show you who I am. And it's just so, yeah, I definitely find that as well. Like, I was like, even when you're doing things like reformer Pilates, which is arguably a less intense form of exercise, but you screw up a reformer Pilates, you're gonna fall through the gap, or you're gonna shake like,
Yeah.
shake like a leaf, and I think I feel that so heavily. Like, it's
Yeah.
even though I'm medicated, I don't think I could get to the level of meditation that most people could. I just,
No.
I find peace in chaos, maybe. Maybe that's it. I find peace and you
Yeah.
have to focus, or there are like literally dire consequences here.
I, it's like it's funny that we need that sort of leverage on ourselves before our brains actually cooperate. Otherwise, the brain's everywhere. But oh my god, I'm going to drop 100 kilos on my head. Okay, I'll focus now. It's like, yep, yes you will. So I'm glad I'm not the only one, because I know so many people talk about meditation this, meditation that, and it's like, yeah, it works for you. That's great, but for me, whatever. Anyway, Shae, just before we get to the final 10, is there anyone that you'd like to say thank you to, or just give a shout out to, for supporting you this far along your journey?
Oh God, do you want to be on for another 90 minutes?
This
No.
is your like Academy Award speech. If you take too long, we'll begin playing the music to play you off stage.
Start buzzing me out.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, firstly, thank you to Nutvon for connecting us. I think she's allowed me to skyrocket into the queen that I am right now, and the queen that I can be in later on in the year. I'm getting emotional already. Um, Obviously my family, it's my family and my friends have always inspired me on these crazy decisions I make, whether it's from doing computer science or doing pageantry and all that sort of good stuff in between. And their support means everything. I was so lucky. I had a huge crowd at Miss Earth New Zealand. Like, it was deafening. And my cousin, who's basically my sister, did a haka for me when I won, and it was just like, oh my god. So definitely those people. My best friend Abby, who's basically coached me through everything, and I want to shout out to her own journey that I've been so fortunate to be a part of. And the last person, and my parents, obviously, they kicked me into overdrive. The last person I want to thank, it's actually really funny because unlike me, he doesn't love heaps of attention. And I always manage to rope him in by thanking my beautiful partner, Elijah. He's a tradie. He doesn't know about pageants, but now he does. And it's just, yeah, he is the best. And I genuinely don't think I would be where I am now or where I'm, could be without all of those people. So, and to my dog Poppet, even though she barely can hear or see anymore, but that's my girl. Poppet?
Oh, oh, didn't you say it's golden retrievers and a German shepherd? Poppet's like the name for a small dog, isn't it?
No, Poppet's so she's a Shih Tzu, so I don't live with
Oh,
her.
right.
She lives with my dad. I can tell you the dogs I live with, their names, because they're equally funny. So Brooks, the German shepherd, and then the Goldens are called Moose and Tucker.
I don't know what to say. I don't see any like connection between the three, but okay.
None.
None. Okay, great. So it's not just me. All right. Okay, let's go through these final 10 random questions. Number one, what is your favorite word?
Conscientious. I can't say my favorite word, but that is
Conscientious.
it.
Perfect. Conscientious. All right. Number two, what is your least favorite word?
Moist.
One day actually, I'm going to go on ChatGPT after this and ask why so many women hate the word moist. I'm going to see I'll do deep research mode and see what it comes up with. Number three, in life, what gets you excited or what turns you on?
Change. Learning and change.
That's interesting from a psychological point of view. It's no wonder you're interested in AI. Number four, what turns you off?
Close-mindedness.
Number five, what sound or noise do you love?
I love the sound of heels clicking on a floor. like that sort of on a wooden floor. Love it.
What sound or noise do you hate?
The sound of when you get like a blood test and the blood's coming out of you, ugh, they're like, whoosh, ugh.
Half my audience has now just passed out, as I found out from my recent interviews. About half of them, if they see their own blood, they will pass out. I interviewed an American title holder. She cut herself in the shower shaving, and she passed out in the shower. So it's it's really funny, but also quite sad. Number 7, if you could have any one superpower, what would you pick and why?
I wanted to be a smart ass and say something like infinite money glitch, but I think definitely seeing into the future.
That would be fascinating. Number 8, what job other than your own would you most like to attempt?
Special effects like makeup artistry, like really gory, yucky stuff too.
Zombie apocalypse style.
Yeah, yeah, Walking Dead, all that good stuff, action movies, love it.
What about what job would you definitely not like to attempt?
Probably being an accountant, not for me.
Yeah, that
Respect to
makes
the accountants, but I'd be terrible.
that makes two of us. I'm often tempted to just go up to people and say, I could replace you with a few lines of code, but I don't know. That's the way my brain's going. But I don't say that. I'm sure they'll be offended. Number 10, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gate?
Every single dog that has ever existed and every single animal is here.
Well, it's been a ride. We've been on for a while, Shae. Thank you so much for coming on and helping to educate our audience about AI.
Thank you so much for having me, Adrian. It's been an absolute pleasure and never a chore.
I hope not. I'll keep you on the line for just a second whilst I hang out with the audience, but thanks to everyone for watching, and we will speak to you next time.